This particular case scared me half to death. Not that I would die, but something just as bad where I might be to blame. I was working street crimes in an undercover car riding around the housing projects looking for drug dealers. It was in the time when crack cocaine was everywhere. I pulled into one complex which was about 10 two-story buildings separated by some green space very similar to some of the buildings featured on the TV show The Wire. I saw a thickly built man standing in the back parking lot. I gave him a quick "what's up" sign by holding my hands out the window, palms up. He quickly motioned for me to park in the back parking lot. I got out of the car and walked up to him. The conversation went like this. "What do you need?" "What do you got?" "I'm looking for rock." We negotiated for a $20 rock, crack cocaine, and I pulled out a 20 and he opened his hand and showed me a handful of small pieces of something that looked like crack, and I picked one. The next thing I did was really stupid. I went against all my training and attempted to make an arrest from an undercover position. That's a big no-no in narcotics. I had a partner waiting scrunched down in the car as backup, so I went for it. I grabbed the hand with the rocks and pulled my other hand out of my coat pocket, which had handcuffs which were loaded. That's the term we use for holding a pair of hinged handcuffs in a position where you can just strike the person's wrist with the cuff and it will snap onto him. I was confident that once I got one cuff on, I could take him to the ground using the leverage of the hinged cuffs. Before he knew what happened, the cuff hit his wrists and he was mine. Or so I thought. As the cuff flipped around his wrist, it caught his jacket sleeve and flipped back open. From that point, the fight was on. He wasn't trying to hurt me, but he was sure trying to get away. It was a 2-minute all-out wrestling match between the dealer, my partner, and me before we could get him in cuffs. I was so tired I can remember just laying on him for a minute or two, totally out of breath. But that wasn't the scary part. We scooped up some pieces of crack off the ground as evidence and transported him back to the station. He kept saying they were phony and weren't actually cocaine. My partner left and I stayed to process this guy on a sale charge and put him in jail. In the processing room, there was a metal bar which was bolted to the wall next to a bench which was also bolted down. The bar ran horizontal and was about 4 foot long and was about 3 feet off the ground. He sat on the bench with one of his wrists cuffed to the bar. I started processing the guy and he asks me for a drink of water. I see him trying to wet his lips with his tongue, so I go into the next room and get him a drink. When I return, he's hanging by his wrist, still attached to the bar, and his eyes were rolled in the back of his head and he's shaking. To put this into context, about a year prior we had a suspect who died in an ambulance on the way to the hospital after passing out in that very same room cuffed to that very same bar from a drug overdose. The people of our city went into an uproar and we had protests, marches, and civil unrest for probably 3 weeks. It was now clear this guy must have eaten a lot of crack cocaine during our wrestling match. We weren't waiting for any ambulance. I carried him to a patrol unit and raced him to the hospital just 2 miles away. I can't start to describe the sheer panic of knowing you're racing a dying person you just fought with to the hospital. I honestly thought he would die and it would be my fault. Why did I try to arrest him when I was undercover? I could have arrested him on the sale charge at any time. Now he may die and it was because I broke an important rule of undercover work. I had a very long night as his blood pressure was off the charts with high numbers being way over 200. I was sure he was going to die and I would be found responsible for his death. They pumped his stomach and did some other things to get his blood pressure down and he survived. The attending doctor said it was a very close call and he cheated death this time. ER doctors and nurses are heroic. When he woke up, I was there and I told him he scared me half to death. I sat with him most of the night and we talked. He was still my prisoner until he was cleared. Over the course of 8 hours, we actually gained a lot of respect for each other and he had become a valuable person to talk to about things going on in the streets. After that, as a sergeant and later as a watch commander, I would personally inspect anyone brought to the station who had run from or struggled with the police. Later as the patrol commander, this became a departmental policy. I would look at their pupils, I would watch their respiration, and I would talk to them to make sure they were all right. No one else is going to overdose on my watch or in my department. I was on patrol behind a strip mall when I got a call about someone being attacked in the front parking lot of the bar in the front of the mall that I was at. I drove around to the front in seconds, knowing that backup was minutes away. As I pulled up, one man had a long iron pole in his hands raised up as if he was ready to strike another man on the ground with it. The other was looking up at him with his hands up, apparently defensively, and there was a huge crowd surrounding this area, so even though it looked like a deadly force situation, I decided not to draw my gun. This was before tasers. I literally walked right up to them and using my voice of command told them to drop the pole. The man holding the pole started to say something, but I told him again in a tone of voice that he could not mistake or argue with, and he dropped it. I kicked the pole out of reach under a car and stood myself directly between these two men who just moments ago appeared like they were ready to kill each other. I told both of them to say nothing and stay still until the other officers began to arrive. From a purely tactical standpoint, it was probably the stupidest move I ever made. I knew nothing about these two men or why they appeared to be ready to kill each other. I had no idea who in the crowd was on which side, if either, and here I was standing within arm's length of them, dominating and controlling a potentially deadly force situation with nothing more than fearless officer presence. As it turned out, I had done exactly the right thing, although I would have been justified in shooting the man with the pole, if I could have done so without putting anyone in the crowd at risk. What was discovered after interviewing the 2 men and witnesses in the crowd was that the man holding the pole was the bar bouncer, and the man on the ground had been kicked out of the bar earlier and was not happy about it. He tore down a street sign for the iron pole and waited to ambush the bouncer with it at closing time. As it happened, the bouncer had managed to grab it and pull it away from the man, pulled it away with enough force that it was over his head the moment I arrived. The man on the ground of course had his hands raised as the pole had just been pulled out of them by the bouncer. If I had used my gun, I would have shot the bouncer who was defending himself from his attacker. I had arrived at just the right moment when everything appeared exactly the opposite. I took command of a potentially deadly situation with no backup and without using a weapon, and as a result wound up not shooting the wrong person. This is the most memorable moment of my career, and although no one else at the time had a clue, the scariest. Standing between 2 guys who appeared to have the intent of killing each other. This is the reality of police work. Split-second life or death decisions made with minimal information and putting ourselves in imminent danger to minimize the risk to onlookers and others on the scene. This just happened a few hours ago. I have called and reported it to the police and am home safely, but I guess I'm still in shock. Could do putting it down in writing to process it and figured this is as good a place as any to share what had happened. I finished work early today, so decided to go for a run. I set out around 4:30 and decided my usual routes, which cross many country roads, will not be very practical, and so I took an alternate route along a canal towpath and some pathways through the woods that I knew would be less busy. Everything was going well. I was pushing myself steady until I got to a path on the way back around 6 kilometers into the route. It is a long, straight path with a canal on the left side, and on the right there's wasteland where some factories used to be, but have mostly been demolished. It has been abandoned for as long as I can remember and is overgrown with trees and weeds, but there are odd bits of old factory that for some reason weren't fully demolished. As I got level with one part of the factory, which still had some old metal fire escape steps attached to it, I noticed a rough-looking guy sat on the wall with his legs hanging down. He jumped to his feet as soon as he saw me coming and shouted something, but I couldn't make it out. As I came level to where he was, I heard him say, "Wait there! Can you help me find my phone?" He said while he was running down the steps, and so I stopped as I got level with the bottom of the steps, meaning we were standing just a few feet apart but with a fence in between us. It was a really old iron fence with vertical metal bars that have spikes at the top, like you sometimes see around churches and things. He asked me if I would help him find his phone again, saying he had dropped it somewhere nearby, and asked me if I could ring his number so he could listen for it. I felt I couldn't exactly refuse as my phone was strapped to my arm, so I said he could tell me the number, and I took my phone off my arm and unlocked it. He blurted out a phone number but said it far too fast, and it didn't begin with a 07, which made me start to feel like something wasn't right. Although I was beginning to suspect at this point, I wasn't really worried. I'm in pretty good shape, had a big size and weight advantage over him, plus there was a fence between us. He didn't seem in very good physical shape and seemed like he might be homeless. I figured if he was trying to mug me for my phone, his only chance would be to pull a knife, so I made sure to stay a good distance away from the fence and kept an eye on where his hands were. So I told him I didn't catch any of the numbers because he was going too quickly, and he came out with another number this time, and this time it did have a 07 at the beginning. I entered 7 numbers, and then he started to look around and said, "I can hear it. Come and help me look for it," as he was looking around at the ground. I was about to say that I hadn't even finished dialing when a much larger black guy appeared from behind a section of the wall to my right. He was also really scruffy looking, and from the look in his eyes it seemed like he was on drugs. He came out saying he could hear the phone ringing over towards him and beckoned me to come through a gap in the fence and help look. The white guy then said, "Is it ringing, yeah?" And I told him that it was, even though I still hadn't dialed the last digits, and now I was sure they were trying to lure me to come over to that side of the fence. After 2 or 3 times of them both beckoning me to come and help, always insisting they could hear the ringing, I heard the black guy say, "He's not gonna fall for it." He said it in a hushed way as if he thought I wouldn't hear, but with being in the middle of nowhere, I could clearly understand what he said. The white guy started acting quite aggressive and punched a tree, telling me he needed his phone badly and his whole life was on the phone, telling me to come and help them look for it. While he was punching the tree and ranting, the black guy had taken a few steps away to the right, meaning I couldn't keep my eyes on both at the same time. It was after 5 p.m. by this point, and it had gotten dark all of a sudden, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. I noticed there was a gap in the fence where some of the bars had been removed right where the black guy was heading, and I decided at that point to get the hell out of there and made a run for it. Neither of them said anything as I ran away, which made me sure they had malicious intentions. If they had genuinely lost their phone and needed some help, I would have expected them to shout, "Where are you going?" or something to try to get me to come back, but they didn't shout anything. After sprinting a good 20 to 30 seconds, I turned to see if they were chasing me. They were both standing on the path around where the gap in the fence had been cut, but not chasing me. They were just standing there watching me run away. I continued running away, but kept looking back every few seconds until I was out of sight. It was at this point I got off the canal path and onto the roads. The person I spoke to on the phone to report it took my details and description, but seemed like it wasn't anything worth worrying about, but said it would be investigated. The whole incident has left me a bit unnerved, and I'm pretty sure I won't be jogging that route alone anytime soon. This happened earlier this week, and it still freaks me out. I work at a hotel in town and was driving my husband's truck into work as he was taking mine to the shop to get serviced. He has a very large truck, and I only drive it when I absolutely have to. When I pulled into the side parking lot, I noticed the entire lot is covered in snow and no one can see the lines for the spots, so I begin to look like a moron and try to park in what I hope was a spot, backing up and moving forward several times. When I finally park, I get out of the truck and grab my backpack when I hear someone yelling from the sidewalk from behind the parking lot. "Hey, you need to learn how to fucking park." I'm embarrassed, but just close the truck, lock it, and begin walking to the front of the building. The hotel has a side entrance for employees, but it takes a code and I have a shitty memory, so I just walk to the front and go through the main entrance. I hear the guy yelling again. "Did you hear me, bitch?" I walk faster and take a peek behind me. The guy is following me. I keep walking but call back, "Please leave me alone, I need to go to work." Before I can reach the corner of the building and make my way to the entrance, the guy grabs my arm and spins me around. I will never forget what that guy looked like for as long as I live. He wore dark clothes with a torn-up winter coat. His eyes were bloodshot and he smelled like a combination of cigarettes and whiskey. I guessed he may have been drunk, but he didn't slur at all when speaking. "You're coming with me." The guy began dragging me back to the truck and I tried to pull my arm away from him. "Let go of me." "Give me the keys. We're taking a drive." I begin to yell for help as his grip on my arm gets tighter. I'm a 26-year-old woman, not skinny but not a lot smaller than this guy. He was dragging me easily and the snow on the ground just made my feet slide along on the ground. "Someone help! Please!" No one was near us and I keep fighting to get away from this guy. I prayed there would be guests that could possibly hear me, but it was our slow season, so most likely there was no one in the rooms on that side of the building. The guy turns back to glare at me. "Shut the fuck up and give me the keys." Now, I was carrying my backpack on one shoulder as it was big and bulky from my uniform and shoes. I quickly slipped the strap down my arm, grabbed it, and swung it right into his face. The guy let me go and I just ran for my life to the front doors. I heard the guy screaming but ignored him. I was too scared to look back at him. I ran inside all the way to the employee locker rooms. When I finally calmed down enough, I went to the front desk to talk to security. Sadly, there were no cameras on that side of the building, so nothing was recorded. They called the cops and I made a report. The cops informed the general manager of the hotel that they seriously needed to consider security cameras on that side of the building, as drunks and druggies were known to be in this area. There was a bar just a couple streets down. They got the description of the guy and said they would keep an eye out for him. The manager apologized like crazy about the incident, but I told him it wasn't his fault. He's a really good guy. I did ask for the security guard to follow me out so I could check on the truck. Thankfully, it was fine. The security guard promised to make more rounds outside, especially that early in the morning. I live in a middle-low-class neighborhood in the Caribbean. It's a quiet place where nothing happens. The type of place where people go and retire to sip pina coladas all day. However, a few houses next to mine lived a family that were not like the rest. They had the biggest house on the street and lived luxuriously. Their kids would play with me, especially the smallest girl we all nicknamed Tiny. Tiny was about 5 when I was 11, and she was always at my house. I knew my mom and the neighbors were concerned about a 5-year-old being all day outside, not arriving at her house until midnight on school days. But it was a quiet place where nothing happened, so no one got worried. When Tiny turned 6, her parents threw a giant birthday party for her and all the neighborhood kids were invited. I wanted to go. They had bouncy houses, water slides, and everything a kid would want to play with, but my parents didn't allow me to go. I never knew why. I supposed it was because my mom didn't know her mom. I remember feeling very sad because everyone was there and I was playing alone at my house. After the birthday, things went back to normal, and one day we were all playing and talking about what our parents did for work. We asked Tiny and her siblings, but none of them knew what they did exactly, except that he traveled a lot to his meetings. I didn't pay much attention and we continued on with our day. One night we were playing on the street when we started hearing loud pops coming from Tiny's house. I will never forget that day. The neighbors, including my mom, came out rushing us inside yelling it was gunshots. Some of us got in my house and we stayed there as my next-door neighbor, who was a cop, ran towards Tiny's house. All we saw after the gunshots was a black van rushing down the street and almost killing a dog. Some men entered the house. Tiny and her siblings wanted to check what was going on, but everyone forbade them to go. All I remember was a bunch of cops and ambulances a few minutes later, and in a day I never saw Tiny or her siblings again. For a couple of months the house sat empty, but black vans and strange men kept coming into the neighborhood door to door asking for any information about the man and his children. No one in the neighborhood spoke about it. I know the cops asked me about Tiny and the kids and if they ever said anything weird about their dad or mom, but I was only 11 and more concerned about playing Mario Kart Wii than what was happening that night. Years passed and the story faded away. Now that I'm grown, I asked my neighbor, the cop, what went down that night, as there were rumors the guy died. He said that night the man got a gun emptied into his skull and his wife was gravely wounded. She survived, because he was a drug lord who was making deals with the police to turn in rival gangs and some other people to the cops. The men in the van that were going door to door wanted to know where his kids and wife were to also shut them up. As to the kids, his oldest son was found dead a few hours away in a neighboring town, his car set ablaze. His other children are now living in other countries under witness protection programs. I just hope wherever Tiny is, she's doing okay and her family got the help they needed. Also, a quick edit. I found the link of the news and asked my neighbor about it to give me more details on it. The wife was shot in the leg, which resulted in massive blood loss, but she was overall fine. This happened a few years ago when I was still living with my mom and I had borrowed her car to go see my then boyfriend for the evening. It was around midnight when I got back to my neighborhood, so the roads were empty. And that's when I noticed this dirty, run-down, rusted white utility van that a maintenance guy would drive following me. I never saw the driver's face, but I got this immediate sinking feeling in my stomach because something felt wrong about this van. I was only 20 at the time, but I knew better than just to drive straight to my house and let this person know exactly where I live, no matter how desperately I wanted to go home and ignore it. But I also wasn't 100% sure that they were actually following me yet. I didn't want to jump to conclusions just because it was late and I was alone and being paranoid, so I drove to a shopping complex a few minutes away that was well lit and had a public library to see if I was being followed. I thought I lost the van, but decided to wait in the parking lot for a few minutes because I had a bad feeling I just couldn't shake. Sure enough, the van showed up and was driving in random circles around the parking lot looking for me. This scared me quite a bit, so I drove towards the big mall that's always got security or police presence because it was the midway point between where I was and where I lived. I parked in a pretty well-lit, although empty, 24-hour McDonald's parking lot where I had a great view of the roads and the mall, but I wasn't super easy to spot, and waited to see if the van would show up looking for me. It did. And of course, this would be the one time security and the cops were nowhere to be found, which was half the reason I decided to head there in the first place. Realizing whoever was driving this van 100% was actively following me in the middle of the night, I knew just driving home was not an option, and that's a terrifying realization. Luckily, the police station is just a few minutes away from where I was, so I try and discreetly drive away, hoping the van hasn't noticed me yet. I wasn't lucky because it wasn't long before the van was back in my rearview mirror. At this point, I'm panicking pretty hard and my anxiety is high. I finally pulled into the police station parking lot, and seconds later the van came to a stop in the middle of the road for no more than a few seconds. I'm guessing just long enough for them to realize where I led them, and they took off immediately. And so fast. I did make it home safe and without seeing the van again not long after, but this whole ordeal took at least an hour of my night. It was after 1 a.m. by the time I made it home, and I was terrified the whole time. I don't know what this guy's specific intention was, but honestly, I don't need to know. I know it was nothing good, and I likely avoided a very bad situation. If you think someone is following you, it's not stupid or paranoid to make sure you aren't right. Who knows what might have happened if I had just led him to my house or gotten out of the car. I've come a long way from the life I used to live. About 6 years ago, I was a homeless drug addict. You know the epidemic. I was trying to find somewhere safe to sleep. I foolishly cut down an alley. Birmingham, Alabama is known for violent crime, and as I was walking I saw a silhouette of a man not too uncommon as there are many homeless people from Birmingham. But something felt off. Something felt sinister. Before I could even set my bag down behind a dumpster, he was already feet from me. He began screaming, "I know what you did, you piece of shit." I have never met this dude in my life. Before I could even say anything, I felt a sharp pain in my left cheek. He had stabbed me through the cheek with a 3-inch knife. He stabbed me again, and I tried to dodge it, but he gashed me under my right eye. I began to fight back and managed to get the upper hand on him as he was much smaller than me. I hit him 3 good times in the face. I felt his jaw break, and at that point he took off running. I was bleeding profusely and could put my tongue through my cheek. It took 22 stitches to sew up the hole in my face, and 8 stitches for the gash under my eye. At the hospital I filed a police report, and to this day nothing's come of it. I'm back on my feet now, but I still live in Birmingham, and to this day I still get nervous when people walk behind me. I hope and pray I never see that guy again. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. Describes my childhood and fits in well here, so I decided to share. It was 2009. I'm in high school and I'm a male. English is not my first language, so feel free to give me a writing lesson. I live on an island where most people live near the coast, but my childhood house is deep in the mountains. Imagine a house in the woods, but at the very top of a mountain. The house is surrounded by thick mist every night like in a bad horror movie, and the woods around it start less than 2 feet from the outer walls of the house. Our closest neighbor is a 15-minute drive, and 5 minutes away there's an abandoned house. I think the house belonged to a distant relative, but was abandoned more than 40 years ago. There's no street lights, and there's all kinds of animals roaming the area. This is important to the story because even though you couldn't see a group of 10 people hiding 1 meter away from you in the woods, you could hear absolutely everything up to a couple kilometers away. If we saw car lights or heard a car approaching, me and my family would turn off the lights and hide. Don't know why. Shy, antisocial, you name it. I think that's enough setup to the story, but I'll add some details that might be important. My house is small and impoverished, but our family car was a good one. I don't know much about cars, but my dad always says without a really good car we wouldn't be able to make it up and down the mountains where we lived. Also, there's currently 8 people inside our house at around 11 p.m. So I'm at the dining room table enjoying some cereal while I'm watching anime and having the time of my life. The lights in the house were on, so nothing could be seen in the dark outside. There's a window in front of me that gives to the front of the entrance of the house and the only road. Something calls my attention, but I neither hear nor see anything. I think I see a human silhouette outside, but it doesn't move, so I just ignore it as some effect of the lights in the house and my own reflection. More anime and more cereal. I feel something moving on the other side of the window, and this time the silhouette is waving at me. I felt my heart jump out of my chest and I froze. The person outside waves at me as if trying to not let anybody else in the house notice him. After maybe 10 seconds in which I'm looking at him with a spoon halfway to my mouth, he decides to say, "Hello, I need help." My parents hear him and approach the window, which made me sure I wasn't looking at a ghost. Amazing news. The man outside starts telling a story about how he had his car stolen at gunpoint and he needs help. My parents are surprised that nobody heard footsteps or a car or anything, so they whisper their theories amongst themselves. For the mysterious guy's story to be true, he had to have been mugged more than a mile away, got his car stolen, and then walked for a half an hour in the dark through the woods following the dim lights of our house. My parents still decided to believe him and they offered to call the police. The visitor begs to say the stupidest thing he could have. "Don't call the police. I don't have a gun." My parents stay silent for a while. The guy outside knows he messed up but proceeds to make his request. "Can I get a ride downtown?" My dad nervously chuckles and gives him an excuse. He mentions the time, the fact that the guy was lying and he had already called the police. A lie. This is when my favorite part of the story begins. I stand up from the table shaking. I go to the closet, and even though I can't see this guy's face, I know he's following my actions. I get 2 machetes that are half my size and run to another room. I was terrified, and looking back, I probably took away the only weapons my parents could have used to protect themselves in case of an altercation. I opened the door to the room where me and my siblings sleep, and they were watching some silly show, probably something stupid like Hannah Montana or iCarly, and their hyena laughter came out. My sisters are loud, and my younger brothers are 4 years old, 7 years old, and 9 years old, so their laughs are angelic by day and demonic by night. I signal at them to shut up, and they do so, joining me and my parents in our fear. We listen in silence as the guy says, "It's okay if you can't help me. I'll go to the next house." My dad says, "There is no next house. You should just wait for the police here." The stranger says, "I don't need the police, I'm good." This goes back and forth. The guy is now in good shape to walk an hour down the mountain to reach downtown. My dad offers a rusty metal tricycle from our porch so that he can go downtown as a joke. The guy accepts his offer and grabs the tricycle. I assumed he just wanted to leave with something. This tricycle is 20 years old and it definitely doesn't work. We hear the screeching of the tricycle for a couple seconds as the stranger struggles to be able to ride it and then stop not too far away from the house. It seemed like he stopped, and we didn't hear any footsteps that indicated the guy had left. After trying to identify if he was still in sight to no avail, my dad calls the police. We wait in silence, looking at the road from the front windows. 15 minutes later, the police get there. And as soon as the red and blue lights show up, they illuminate the entire road up to the abandoned house. The tricycle is still in the road not too far away. The police claim not seeing anybody on the road. There's only one road in the mountain, and if the guy kept walking, they would have seen him. So they just took a look at the woods with a flashlight and called it a day. The cops were clearly freaked out by the eerie look of our house and did not stay more than 5 minutes. Nothing else happened that night. I slept with 2 machetes under my pillow, which I remember angered one of my sisters. We have no idea who the person was. No carjackings were reported the next day, and even though a lot of weird things happen around my house, we never saw this guy again. It's pretty obvious he was trying to steal our family's car. But there were a few things we could never understand. Where the hell did he come from? Where the hell did he go? If his story was true, he had the worst luck in the world. I think the situation was interesting because I think about it from his point of view, and our horror night turns a bit comical. I mean, imagine this. You go to rob a house. Turns out the people inside speak calmly. I don't know how many criminals encounter this as they try to intimidate or deceive. There's a scrawny, seemingly mute kid that tries to be sneaky and grabbing some machetes and then hides in darkness in the house. And there's child laughter coming from the non-visible rooms of the house. He could see the doors, but seeing inside the rooms would be impossible looking through the windows. I think we were lucky to out-creep the creep that night. I don't see any other reason for the guy to back out of his plans. The guy clearly had a gun and bad intentions, not to mention his ability to ninja walk through a forest where we could hear wild cats walking around. Also, no neighbors to witness or hear anything. I hope to never meet him, even though I wouldn't know since I didn't see his face. I still don't know why this person did this or thought it was funny. It was one of my last year's trick-or-treating. I loved and I still love Halloween, so I always planned on leaving the house as early as possible and staying as late as I could without harassing people in the neighborhood. My friend and I were about 13 at the time, both girls. We were heading home from a long night of trick-or-treating, exhausted. It was around 10 at night if I recall correctly. The star-covered pillowcase laying over my shoulder weighed many, many pounds. We moved slowly through the neighborhood, which was now fairly dark with all the houses having turned off their lights. Only a few streetlights guided us. I noticed that a tan sedan was behind us, driving very slowly. I suddenly became aware of how very dark it was on this road. We were so close to my house, but not close enough. Nobody else was on the road. Just me and another 13-year-old girl, being followed. It was so dark that we had no chance of seeing into this car, compounded by the fact that the car was always just far enough back. It was one of the very first times I was acutely aware of both my gender and my age. I nudged my friend and told her about the car behind us. Neither of us recognized it, and we were so young that none of our friends knew how to drive, so it wasn't one of them. We kept walking, periodically checking behind us. The car was still there. We finally turned the corner onto the street where I live. The car waited and then turned too. We started walking fast, really fast. I don't know why we didn't drop the candy that was weighing us down. Maybe we were trying to be subtle until we got into view of my house and then sprint for it. Suddenly the car sped up, catching up to us, and started honking loudly. My whole body froze, a shock of lightning running through it. The windows rolled down, and it's my mother and her friend. For some goddamn reason, the woman who taught me stranger danger probably drank some wine with her friend and thought it would be hilarious to trick her daughter into thinking she was going to be kidnapped and killed. Which of course it fucking wasn't. It was terrifying. And no, we weren't late for curfew or anything that would give her cause to be looking for us. She just thought it would be a funny prank. The sound of slightly buzzed-on wine mom cackling still pisses me off to this day. When I was in 6th grade, my uncle forgot to pick me up, so I sat obediently in the waiting shed at our school. I waited for him for hours until I could see no more students playing in the school ground. When the sky was getting darker and I was practically alone now, it was a small school, there was this guy who looked up at my school as if he was waiting for his child. I ignored him and walked to the school gate to wait there instead. When I did, he approached me. I stood there silently as I waited for my uncle while he just stood there as well. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked, finally making the decision to talk to me. "I'm waiting for my daughter." I merely nodded at him, quite nervous. For the next few minutes he engaged me in a casual conversation about the school and about his daughter. I didn't mind at first, but the sky was really getting darker, so I was very worried and ended up not listening to him. Then he started to come closer. "Look, it's going to rain," he pointed out, voicing out my concern. "The van's coming any time to pick us up, so let's just wait." Immediately I got the chills when he mentioned van, because during that time vans were popularly used by kidnappers. Alarmed, I moved away from him and decided to wait by the bakery across the school. However, as I distanced myself from him, he reached out and grabbed me. This provoked me to flee. "Hey, wait! You see, you really do look like someone I know," he spoke, thinking that it might distract me. "You really look like my niece. Do you know Samantha? She must be in the same grade as you." And then started to follow me, and that provoked me to run. It drizzled as I headed to the bakery, but I figured that he might still catch me there because the old baker wouldn't be able to fight him off. Instead, I went straight to the gasoline station, which was 10 minutes away from the school. I kept running until I lost him. When I finally got there, I was soaking wet and alone as I held my sling bag. I didn't realize that I was so scared until I felt my knees shaking when I decided to walk home, which was 15 minutes away from the gasoline station. When I got home, I went and told my mom about the creepy guy and brushed it off later that night, The next day I went to school. During the flag ceremony, a teacher pulled me aside and hugged me so tight that she pushed my face to her chest. "Thank goodness you're safe," she exclaimed as she held me tight. I was very confused until later on I was asked by my class advisor to see her during lunch. As requested, I went to see her. In her office, I saw the same teacher who had hugged me during the flag ceremony along with a bunch of teachers. She narrated to them how she had witnessed a man following me as I ran away. They started discussing about it and the recent 2 students who were kidnapped from my school. When I went home, I was very shaken to have been informed that I could have been kidnapped, chopped, and sold to sick people out there. As I entered the house, I saw my parents talking with 3 men and with my uncle, who was the police. That night they interviewed me about the old man, but I could only offer little information that really didn't help them much. I didn't know what happened then. However, thinking about it now, it is indeed the scariest thing I have encountered yet. It's all fine and dandy to be trusting of others until you put yourself in a situation where you could possibly be murdered or stolen without a witness in sight. My freshman year of college, I lived with my now ex-boyfriend in an apartment attached to our landlord Charlie's house. A long, lonely road led up to my driveway, and the acres of gardens and grass on the property required constant maintenance, so Charlie would often hire help. During one summer, Charlie hired a man who needed work but was having a hard time getting back on his feet after family difficulties. Charlie helped tow this man's broken car onto their property, and the man lived in Charlie's house and worked to earn money to fix the car. I had never been formally introduced to this man, but he was recognizable with this long, dark, dreaded hair. I saw him every day for about a month. One night at around 8 p.m., I heard a confident knock on my door. Opening the door, I saw Charlie's worker. He lifted a hand and waved hello, and I waved back. "Oh," he said. "I was looking for your husband." "My boyfriend," I corrected. "And he's not home. What do you need? I can take a message." "I'm sorry for it being so late, but I really need a ride to DHS tomorrow since my car is broken. Charlie won't be home tomorrow. I'm trying to work out things with my kid and my ex-wife. Will your boyfriend be home tomorrow?" he asked, sounding legitimately distressed. "Well, my boyfriend won't be home, but I'd be happy to give you a ride," I said nonchalantly. DHS was pretty close, and it was summer. I was finished with classes and bored out of my mind on the days I wasn't working my part-time job. "That would be really great," he said. "Yeah, no problem," I replied. "See you tomorrow at... when?" 8 in the morning if you can do that." "Yeah, for sure. Good night." I shut the door. Walking to my bed, I set my alarm for 7:30 in the morning. The next morning I woke up, dressed myself, brushed my hair and teeth, and went outside to sit in my 1995 Oldsmobile to wait for my passenger. The man came out of Charlie's house and hopped into my passenger seat. "Sorry it's so humid in here, and a little bit of a mess. I just turned the AC on," I said. "Don't worry about it," he replied. "Hey, just a second. Can you pull up next to my car over there so I can grab something of mine?" "Yeah, of course," I responded. I pulled alongside his broken-down car. Leaving my passenger door open, he opened my back door and his back door, grabbed a box of items, and threw them into my back seat. Watching him, I quickly felt that something wasn't right. I gripped the steering wheel and looked straight ahead, feeling my anxiety heighten. Then, throwing himself back in through my open passenger door, he said, "I'm ready." I had no words. My intuition told me that I was in danger, so I shut down. I silently prayed that he just intended to exchange the box of his belongings with someone at DHS. But after a few seconds that felt like hours driving down the desolate road from my apartment, I realized I had put myself into a dire situation. My boyfriend was at work and my landlord wasn't home. I was a very small woman, 105 pounds, young and trusting to a fault. He towered over me by a foot and his shoulders were double the width of mine. And here I was driving him down the road. In my mind, I cursed myself for being so stupid and naive, realizing that my act of goodwill could be the end of me. I knew something bad was about to happen, and I silently prayed that my intuition, which seemed to kick in way too late, was wrong. The man, after letting me drive about a mile or two down the road, said, "Pull over." Without replying, I pulled to the side of the road, shaking uncontrollably. "Give me your keys," he demanded. I slid the car key off my ring, handed it to him, and left the car without protest. The man drove away with my car. At the time, I didn't care about the old car that was just taken from me. Not at all. I just hated myself for not even considering this man could hurt me. Though terrified, no harm had come to me. I got lucky. One sunny afternoon, I decided to go on a long drive along with a friend of mine. We didn't know then that it would be the scariest long drive ever. We decided to visit Elora. We didn't intend to visit the caves as such, but the places around it. Those roads through the mountain gave us a view that we all wanted to experience. We left around 4:30 p.m. and we reached the place around 5:45. The sun was about to set, so we decided to halt, and after we were done with the sunset, we left for our places. I decided to take another route as there is a lot of traffic near the outskirts of Aurangabad. We went through the blue one, but decided to come back through Jatwada. As I took the left from Millawada, things were really normal for about 100 meters, but after 1 or 2 kilometers, the traffic started becoming lesser and lesser. And after about 4 to 5 kilometers after taking the left, I could hardly see any cars, though there were some bikers, but very few. It was a bit dark now, and the absence of hotels and other vehicles started worrying my friend. I tried using the GPS to see whether we're on the right path or not, but there was no network. A few minutes later, it went dark. There was literally no vehicle come by, nor could I see any headlights coming towards us. Then I saw something a few meters away. Coming closer, I realized it was a teenage boy waving his hands and running towards us. I stopped the vehicle as soon as I saw the motorcycle and a man laying on the ground. I don't know why, but something felt really odd to me. Might have been my instincts. I don't know. The doors and windows were already closed, but I also locked them as well. As I saw the guy coming towards us, I also instructed my friend not to get out of the vehicle or open the doors or windows until I said so. As soon as he came near the car, I opened a small portion of the window so I was able to hear what he was trying to say. Before saying anything, he started pulling the handle of the door and then realized it was closed, so he started speaking. "Please help me. My brother and I had an accident. A dog suddenly came in between and we fell down, and now my brother's bleeding from the head. Please save him." I already felt odd, and now his act of pulling on the handled door alerted me. "You need to calm down, please. I'll call the ambulance." "He could die by the time the ambulance might reach. You come down and we'll take him to the hospital." "Okay, wait a second. Let me call the police. I saw a police van a few kilometers back, and the people in the station can instruct them to come this way. They'll get here quicker." "No, don't call the police, just come down." He then furiously starts to pull the door handle again and again. His eagerness to open the door and make me come down there really set off light bulbs in my head, and now I suspected something was really wrong about this accident. I dialed 100. "Hello, sir. I'm on the Jatwada Road now, and there's 2 people who had an accident, and one of them's bleeding. I saw a police van a few kilometers back numbered MH20. Please ask them to come back this way." "Okay, sir. Thank you." They said they're coming in 5 minutes. As soon as I said the police were coming in 5 minutes, he went silent. Then suddenly he started yelling something in another language and started running towards the fallen vehicle. And suddenly the fallen man woke up and a third guy came running from the side of the road and sat on the bike. Seeing all this, I reversed the car and made a hard U-turn and accelerated hard and made the car run to its fullest. We both were scared. We didn't even talk. I stopped the car near a shop after entering Aurangabad. I got a water bottle and asked my friend to have it. Then I realized my friend was scared as fuck. To calm my friend, I started trying to talk about normal stuff. That's when he asked me how did I remember the police van's number and how come I was the only one that saw the van, and why we didn't wait for the police. To which I replied that there was no such police van and I had no network. I made a fake call and the car number I told them was my own car's number. My office is on the 20th floor. I use a Microsoft phone for 4G data and a hotspot. The name of my hotspot is I Am Watching You. I set this name just for fun. The walkway that connects the elevator and my office is extremely dark even during the day. Without the automated lights and the other office lights on, one can literally not see anything. It was just another day at the office. 2 devices were connected to my hotspot, my Mac and my iPhone. When my work got over at around 10 in the night, everyone had left the office and I was the last one to leave. I packed my belongings, locked the door, and took the elevator. When I reached the ground floor, I realized that my Microsoft phone was missing. So I went up to the 20th floor again to check if I had left it there. It was so dark. I looked around watchfully and entered my office. The phone wasn't there. I checked the pockets of my trousers and it wasn't there. I checked my bag and it wasn't there. I started to worry. In my mind, I was sure there was no other places where it could have been misplaced. I was just getting worried until now. Just concerned. Nothing else. Here is when things changed. I called my phone from another phone in the office. The call got connected. I said hello. There was an absolute silence marred intermittently by some vague ruffling noise. I freaked out terribly. I started sweating all over. I knew that no one could have taken it. Everyone had left minutes before I left and I was sure I took my phone. In an intense hurry, I rummaged through my bag and reached out to my iPhone. Things got really creepy here. I checked the network on it and it said I am watching you, which means the Microsoft phone was somewhere there, but I could not see it. Instantaneously, a sharp chill engulfed my spine, making me shudder. The air around me started getting chill. I could hear a subtle, distant, faint percussion circling me in discordant pitches. I froze and locked myself in a corner, gasping profoundly. I turned on all the lights desperately. Someone was near me. On my left, on my right, just behind me. I could see the robe. The hair was just breezing by. I could feel someone monitoring me at close quarters. I could hear the lock clicking. The lights started flickering. Distant beastly laughter ripped my pounding heart apart. The rug moved a bit, knocked the wind out of me. I was sweating all over. I could feel the sweat dripping from my face and my hands. I could feel my thighs were getting wet. I could literally hear my heart beat. I wanted to shout for help, but no words came out. I was petrified. I could see my masculinity jumping out of the dark, eerie window. I had never been so scared. I whispered a hurried prayer and took careful steps towards the door. All I wanted to do was run away. As I walked towards the door, I could feel a cold breath brushing my neck. The hair on my neck rose abruptly as I screamed loudly. As I landed my butt on the door, I could feel something under my butt. The Microsoft phone was in my left rear trouser pocket. I had checked in my trousers bag, but I had forgotten my left rear pocket. The touch screen is also screwed up so calls get connected when I keep the phone in my pocket. Everything I felt was a manifestation of my thoughts. I genuinely thought I would die. I was convinced that there was a paranormal being around me that night. When I reached the ground floor, I wholeheartedly thanked all the gods out there. The security guards looked at me suspiciously. I was drenched in sweat and tears. Boy, was it scary. Being bitten by a snake. It would have been nice to be bitten by a snake I did not see, but I knew the snake was in the box and had to stick my hand in anyway to save a puppy. I knew it was going to bite me. My mother had a dog in the open garage with a litter of week-old puppies in a box. I heard the mother dog barking ferociously and I went to investigate. She had all of the puppies out of the box except one. Inside the box was a copperhead moccasin curled up to one side and a puppy on the other. I knew if I went to go get a shovel or something, the snake would probably bite or eat the puppy before I returned. I had a split second to make a decision. My hair was standing on my neck. I had thought, if you hold your right hand up towards the snake, he'll watch it and you can grab the puppy with your left. It wasn't a conscious thought, more of a this is what I'm doing. As soon as my hand entered the box, he struck. I was committed to grabbing the puppy, and I did. The snake had firmly stuck its fangs into my hand. I instinctively pulled away and felt myself pulling the attached snake's weight with me. I felt him inject the venom with a twitch. It immediately started burning. The snake released and dropped onto the ground outside of the box. The mother dog attacked it and it slithered out of the garage with a crazed mother on its tail. She chased it into a ditch. I looked at the puppy, which appeared fine. I looked at my hand and there was the classic fang punctures on the top and a row underneath from the lower teeth. It didn't hurt as bad as I thought. I had a fleeting thought that it might not be that bad of a bite. When you're a teenager, you think these things. I gathered up the puppies, placed them in the box, and took them inside the house. I called my mother. She asked how my hand looked, and when I looked again, it was swollen to the size of a baseball. That's when I knew this was bad. My mother told me to call an ambulance. That is the scariest moment of my life. That moment where I had to decide to stick my hand in a box with a copperhead moccasin. But thankfully I recovered. It was a raining day in Florida, as it seems to be almost all of the time. Only this Sunday it was pouring. My family had just left church and I was wearing a pretty flower dress my mother had just bought for me. We stayed after hours to help the church clean up from the service. Sometimes I wonder if we would have left just a little earlier if this would have happened. We were driving down the highway at a nice, safe speed until all of a sudden I heard my dad say in the most calm tone, "Oh crap," and then a loud crash. Our car rolled over twice and immediately caught on fire. We were hit by a company truck. The smell of burning tar, the blood everywhere, and the look of my brother smashed in the front seat, I blacked out. The next moment I was awake, my dad and I were outside of the car laying in the grass. The rain was pouring on us and I could feel the fire ants biting my flesh. He grabbed my hand and told me, "Everything will be okay." I blacked out again, and in the ambulance to the hospital I was basically paralyzed. On the phone with my mom I just kept repeating, "Is Zach okay?" My 9-year-old brain was so scrambled. I thought we were going to die. It took me 2 weeks to fully recover and my brother Zach even longer. His intestines were crushed and he couldn't eat food for weeks. My dad broke his collarbone, almost his neck, and still suffers to this day. My brother Alex got punched in the face with an airbag and still suffers pain from his bulging discs. I cracked my head open to the skull, broke 3 fingers and my wrist. I still suffer from memory loss issues. These injuries don't sound that severe, but when you look at the work this truck did to us, you'll wonder how we even survived. I have no idea how we did. I won't post pictures of my brothers because I'm not sure they'd want them in the world. My mom says God was with us that day. It scares me to think of how close I was to death at the age of 9. This happened 2 years ago, and I learned nothing because I still stop for strangers on the side of the road. The fact that I'm not writing this from the trunk of a car or a serial killer's basement is a testament to how merciful and kind strangers are towards me. All the Buffalo Bills I meet are actually Buffalo chill. Deal with it. It gets worse from here. I'm way too trusting. If someone is walking towards me with a machete, I'm going to assume they just finished innocently chopping their way through a rainforest. So here goes. I was driving home from work at 3 in the morning. In my town, in order to get anywhere, you always have to drive through bushy, uninhabited areas. Suburbs and the main part of town are split up between bushes and rivers. It's like trying to get to Mordor and back every day. Seriously. One does not simply walk from place to place. So I'm driving along singing to my favorite car song, You Can't Hurry Love by Phil Collins. The greatest song ever, when I noticed that a man was standing in the middle of the road waving his arms. He was on the bend in a road, so I almost didn't see him and had to slam on my brakes. As soon as I stopped the car, he starts walking towards me. At this point, I wasn't worried because he was wearing the short version of a Hawaiian shirt, which may as well have been filed under apparel no murderer would ever wear, because they're obviously made for happy, well-adjusted people. So he walks up to my car and I'm winding down the window. I say, "Hey, is everything okay?" He ignored me and walked straight up to my door and opened it. As soon as he pulled my door, I had an insta-shit in my pants and went nope and slammed down the accelerator. The weird thing was the force of the car taking off made the car door swing backwards and hit the guy who was still standing there. So as I'm driving off, I hear him say, "Hey." Like, hey what? "Oh, sorry, my car door hit you in the middle of you trying to turn my skin into a lampshade. My bad." I'll tell you now, for the rest of my drive, my heart was thumping something fierce, and I kept thinking about his shorts, and why would someone wear those cheery shorts be so creepy? There is the slightest possibility he meant no harm, but it was the middle of the night, and I reserve the right to assume every midnight meeting is a possible Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers situation. Every single time I drive through that area, I always point out to my sister where he was standing. Right there. He was standing right there. I nearly died. You didn't nearly die. You're fine. Nobody's getting your organs but me. What do you call it when the twin dies but the other's still hanging around? A twiddo? You were almost a twiddo. If you're thinking, is that all? He opened your car door and you went apeshit and drove away safely? Well, yes, that's what happened. I'm sorry, but I'm not M. Night Shyamalan, and I'm not going to be dead all along to just make it interesting. I was scared. I was hospitalized for about 2 weeks. During my time there, it was required that I was to be assigned a monitor, a nurse to stay in the room with me 24/7. Every few hours, I'd meet a new nurse after their shift ended. Each nurse was kind, empathetic, and sweet, of course. They didn't judge. They were understanding of my situation and didn't let that ruin the fun. We talked, watched movies and YouTube, played with the makeup, and I shared my writing with them, etc. There must have been a mix-up when a male monitor showed up. The thing is, I requested female monitors only. The entire vibe of the room changed. I was immediately uncomfortable. I didn't want to make a big deal at first, since my stay there had been nothing but warm. To make matters worse, it was around 2 a.m., so the hospital was dark, empty, and quiet. This man was awkward. He wasn't like the welcoming, upbeat nurses I'd had so far. He stayed in the dark corner of the room by the desk, just watching me. I tried to pay attention to the TV, but I felt his eyes staring into me with hunger. Every time I'd try to glance over to him to give him a smile, he'd quickly look away. His leg was shaking and he was jittering in his seat. He kept doing this thing where he'd open his mouth as if he was going to speak, but then stop. Is he nervous? I thought. He suddenly started spinning in his chair very slowly. So, he says, slapping his hands on his thighs. Where are you from? Oh, just a little ways south of here, you know. Cool. How old are you? 17. He smirks, asking more generic questions that I try to answer as blandly as I possibly could to hint that I don't want to talk. The energy he gave off sent shivers down my spine. When I looked into his eyes, it looked like something was missing. I don't know how to describe it, but it felt off and I wanted nothing to do with it. The conversation fizzed out. Silence once again filled the room while the TV barked in the background. He just kept readjusting himself in the chair, once every few minutes gazing up at me. He finally works up the courage again to ask, Hey, have you ever been up to the roof? No, the roof? Yeah, we take patients up there all the time, to see the view. It hadn't even been 20 minutes since his shift started. I was also on bed rest, weak and sick. Why? Well, I mean, some patients need help exercising, you know. Can't rest too much. How am I supposed to get up there with all this stuff in my arm? I was referring to the IV, trying to make excuses. I can get a wheelchair for you. Don't you want to see all the lights? There was a hint of irritation in his voice. So other patients go up there too? Yeah, but let's go. Me and you. The tone in his voice still haunts me. I heard that cringing excitement as his face lit up. He was now energized, pestering me to make a choice. You want to go with me? Thankfully, my doctor walked in to run a few tests and check up on me as they did every 4 hours. The monitor must leave the room so the doctor can perform her tasks. As he left, I let out a big sigh of relief. How's it going, sweetheart? She asks, fluffing my pillow. Good, but I don't want to bother you, but I'd like female monitors only. Please? I'm sorry, I say, looking down. She looks into my eyes, only imagining how frightened I must have felt alone in this room, knowing my history. There's a look of empathy in her eyes. Honey, I'm so sorry. There must have been a mistake. I'm fixing this right now. After my doctor finished checking everything, she left. The monitor walks in to grab his bag and winks at me on his way out. In comes a new monitor. She instantly cozies right into the couch next to me. We have a great time. Hey, can we go to the roof when the sun comes out? The roof? She snickers. Why? Well, don't you guys take people up there? She paused with a serious look on her face. To the roof of the hospital? No. No, we don't. I don't even have access to the roof. I'm sorry? Oh, no worries. I don't want to go anymore anyway. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and hit the notification button. And if you would like to help the channel and get yourself some exclusive content, I would recommend becoming a patron or a channel member. You can find a link in the description that links to Patron, and to join as a member, you just click the join button next to the subscribe button. Get yourself some cool perks. I hope you're all having a great day, and I really do appreciate you watching this video. And I will catch you in the next one. And just remember, It's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.